Hey, this is Tad Frederick. Welcome back to Honest to God. Left you last week with talking about how Christians really don't have much to do with deciding whether what marriage is, or whether gays should be married, whether you should be married to a farm animal, whether you should be married to a wife, whether you get married in the church or at City Hall. And of course, that's a pretty bold statement. The thing is I want to talk to you about what marriage is. And if we go from what marriage truly is, taught in Ephesians chapter 5, which comes about and is culminated in Revelation 19 through 21, and we understand that that is what God instituted as marriage, then by definition, we have to go through a logical progression that anything other than that is not marriage that God has instituted. So let me go through Ephesians chapter 5. Basically, it's talking about marriage between a husband and a wife, and it goes through the Jewish customs of how you get engaged, which is a Western mindset, but a betrothal period, still marriage. And then the husband goes away, sets up a home, comes back, picks up his wife, consummates the marriage at the wedding feast, and that is the physical representation that the Bible teaches about marriage. But Paul at the end of it says, hey, guess what? I'm talking to you about a mystery, and this mystery is between Christ and the church. So everything preceding that verse is a picture of the true marriage that is ordained by God the Father between God the Son, Jesus Christ, the head of the church, the bridegroom of the church, and the church is Jesus Christ's bride. That is the marriage. That is the only marriage that God has instituted. And if you look in Matthew and Mark, the same passage that Jesus used to introduce a statement, it's only mentioned in those two passages when the Pharisees are talking about marriage and the civil union of marriage and how that all came about, and tried to use that as a big controversy, because that's what the Pharisees were about, is trying to create controversy and discredit Jesus Christ. He did use the creation of Adam and Eve and said a new teaching, and here's the new teaching in Matthew and Mark, that said, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Well, God has put one marriage together, one true marriage, and that's between Christ and the church. And it will be culminated again in Revelation. Let me tell you a little bit about how we know that, and a little bit about Jewish custom. Jewish custom, basically at the wedding time when they were going to be married, the groom would drink from a cup of wine, hand it to his wife. If she drank from the cup of wine, they were married. And then they would not drink of that cup again until he came back to take her to the wedding feast. And they would drink that together, and then they would end up consummating the marriage. Guess what? Here's how this works. At the Last Supper of Jesus Christ, before he faced his crucifixion, he went and gave the disciples a cup, and he says, here, drink of this, and I will not drink of this cup again until I come and receive you to myself. That would be the culmination of the marriage. We were betrothed at the Last Supper as bride of Christ. He is our bridegroom, and we are waiting for his return to consummate the marriage. That is the one true marriage, the only marriage that Scripture talks about being ordained, instituted, and looked at by God as marriage. So the question comes, well, how about all these other marriages? You know, Moses was married and given in marriage, and they were doing all this and divorce decrees, and why do we have all these things about if a man marries a woman and she doesn't die and he divorces her and remarries? That is all a man-made system that God had to use and work within. He did not institute that. He just had to work within it. And the big thing that he had to work within is to keep all the other laws from being broken. Fornication, adultery, sexual sins were just running rampant. If you look at it in 1 Corinthians, you had some guy that was in the church that was married to his father's wife, or trying to sleep with his father's wife. We don't know whether he was married or not, but that was going on in the church in Corinth. Those sins and those things that were going on, God had to regulate through a divorce decree. It wasn't a God-ordained institution. It was an institution created by man. The institution that's created by man, by marriage, that God has put some prohibitions on, are equal to civil marriage. So we as Christians, the only marriage that we have to protect is the one between Christ and the church, which is spiritual marriage, which is one that you need to get right with and be prepared for the bridegroom coming back. That's the one that you need to be concerned about. Whether Joe marries Steve, whether Frank has 16 wives, whether, Polly marries her goat, it's not any of our business. It's not our job. We get focused on things that we just don't have anything to do with, and we forget the spiritual realities that we're supposed to live within. So I'm telling you, don't worry about who's marrying who. Don't worry about whether it's a sheep or a goat or 15 wives or 5,000 wives or 1,000 wives, 500 concubines. It doesn't matter. God didn't worry about it in the Old Testament. We don't need to be worried about it in the New Testament. I just want you to be focused on what you're supposed to be doing. And I'm Tad Frederick, just trying to be honest to God. If you want to leave your comments, feel free to leave them. Thank you very much.